Yeah, all right. Hey, shalom, shalom. All right, first and foremost, before I get started, I want to give all honor and glory and power to Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahushai, by Hashem, Hakodash. I want to say double honors to our elders, our great apostles, great millstone, GMS, who rule well and teach well, being great example of Israel. All right, man, the elect. All right, I want to say peace and blessings. All right, to the hope the elect on the four corner, pushing the truth and sincerity. All right, that great song that you brought Naba. I just come with another little quick lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh by Shema Shai, and basically responding to the comment board. All right, you had a Jake. All right, come on my comment board yesterday, and I was going to that lesson dealing with, we all gonna have to learn how to get along in order to survive Jacob trouble. And he come on there as in the woe is me spirit as a solo, and it ain't about being a solo and brothers reaching out. Matter of fact, let me go to his comment. Now, this comment that he put on the board. Now, he says, now this is John Thunder 441. He said, true, but men and brothers are alone because men's in camps don't reach out to solo men's. And it's not a thing about reaching out to solo men's, all right, because the prophets on the highways and the hedges, week in and week out, in season, out of season. So in order to even come into a camp, you got to go present yourself before the prophets. So it ain't about men reaching out to you. You have to reach out to men, all right? And how you do that? Present yourself before those men on the highways and the hedges, all right? It says, true, but men and brothers are already alone because men's in camps don't reach out to solo men. So I say this really applied to men's in camps. Nevertheless, shalom. All right, but in general, all right, we know that this word is for, well, this gospel is for the elect. But guess what? People in general, or for them to survive, or for them to make it, all right, in the society, they're going to have to get along. But we know that's not true. We know that they're not going to get along, all right, because they have not the spirit of Yahweh by Shema Shai, you know? So for you, Johnny, Thunder, all right, you got to present yourself. Wherever state, city you in, all right, great millstone is done. So you got to present yourself before them brothers and become a brother. All right? You can't have that wars me spirit. You can't have that it's me, that solo spirit. All right? You can't have that. That's why the scriptures say this. This second Esdras 4:14, all right, 13. And Lord willing, y'all brothers and sisters be edified, while they the law down. This is second Esdras 14 and 13. It said, now therefore set your house in order and reprove thy people. Comfort such of them as be in trouble. Now renounce corruption. And that's the whole deal of being a prophet, of being a man of the Lord. All right? You have to set your house in order first. All right? And then you get the ammunition to go out to reprove, all right, Israel. That's why I say comfort such as them to be in trouble. So therefore, everybody that in this truth, the household of faith, we all catch a hell. So how do we comfort one another? All right, with this word. That's what the scripture says, what that is, 2 Corinthians or 1 Corinthians. Comfort one another with these words. That's how we comfort each other. Yeah, bro, I know we catching hell. All right, but guess what? Just hold on. Elder Kazak, he always put in the chat, one day closer. See, that's comforting. Because we know as we get closer and closer, all right, to the kingdom of heaven, where it's gonna get more tragedy, more hell coming, more evil coming, more violence, more everything. All right, but the comfort is this word that the Most High Yahweh is gonna allow us to endure and escape the real judgment that's coming for 2/3. All right, and it says, "Let go from thee mortal thoughts." And you talking about this only for people in camp. That's a mortal thought, man. You gotta let that go. All right? You gotta let that go. So let go of these mortal thoughts. Cast away the burdens of man. And the burdens of man, all right, is the flesh. The burden of man is the flesh, man. We got to let that shit go, man. We got to be tapping to the spirit and hoping and willing that the Lord do make things happen. The Lord do, cause miracles to happen. That's in the spirit. Because Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai is able, and he will. So it said, let go those mortal thoughts, cast away the burdens of man, put off their weak nature. And that's a weak nature. Not calling you weak, all right, but that mindset. Let's go back to it. True, men and brothers are already alone because in camps don't reach out to solo men. Come on, bro, that's a weak nature. All right? That's a weak nature. Then it says, so I say this really applied to men in camps. Hey, brother, let go of that mortal thought, man. All right? And get down there, all right, where GMS said on the highways and the hedges, and hope the Lord give you the spirit to come in. All right? But it said, let go of those mortal thoughts, cast away the burdens of man, put off that weak nature, and set aside all the thoughts that are most heavy unto thee. You got to set that shit to aside, because Jacob trouble, like I say, is either going to break you or make you, because terrible times is coming. All right? So we got to put off what if. You see? Man, what if, that's a weak nature. You got to believe strongly in Yahweh Shema Shah that he is, and he is a rewarder. And that's what's going to happen, all right, with the true definition of prosperity in a time of trouble. You see that? The Lord going to make sure that his elect, those that stood stiffly, those that made their body living sacrifice, all right, they're going to be A-OK in a time of trouble. They're going to be able to escape. They're going to be able to survive. You see, they're going to be able to eat. They're going to be able to drink. They're going to have a sound mind. Right? Why? Because you set aside the thoughts that was most heavy unto you. Because Yahweh Shah said, cast thy burdens upon me. So when we do catch hell, in the mind, or physical hell, or, mentally hell, then all we have to do is just cry to Yahweh Shema Shah. All right? And it said, haste thee to flee from these times. So we want Yahweh Shema Shah, all right, to continue, all right, to show us favor. And how do the Lord show us favor? By bringing us out of the situation that we put in. Now it says, for greater evils than these, for greater evil than those which have seen happen should be done hereafter. So we're going to have to come together in order to survive Jacob's trouble. Because when you add up what the Lord did concerning even slavery, that was a bad time. All right? When you think about 70 AD, when the Lord ransacked Jerusalem and everything that occurred with that was bad time. But he said those times are not going to equal up to the time that's coming known as Jacob's trouble. So we're going to have to get along, all right, in order to survive Jacob's trouble. All right? Now let me grab this Romans 8 and 28. The Lord will not make it sense. Now this is Romans 28 and Romans 8 and 28. And we know that all things work together for the good of them that love Yahweh Shema Shai. Say God, which is the power, but it's talking about the Heavenly Father Yahweh. But all things work good together. You see that? So we got to be willing to accept, all right, the Lord's will when it comes down, all right, the time of trouble and how things are going to shake out and move and how things are going to be ran. We got to be accepting of that. But guess what? It's going to work out for our good. That's why Isaiah 4 and 1 going to hit hard, because it's going to work out for everyone good. All right, the women's, it's going to work out for them. The men, it's going to work out for them. Even the children, it's going to work out for them. It's going to be for their good. But the way it's happening, if you were worldly, then you'd be like, hell no. The women's be like, no, I ain't gonna have another bitch in my house. My bitch is doing this and, You're going to die that way. You can't have that mindset. All right? It's a time of survival. All right? So we know that all things work together for good for them that what? Love Yahweh Shema Shah. And it said to them who are called according to his purpose. Now you got men in the truth, we are called. But guess what? We hope to be chosen. But only to be chosen if we adopt the mindset of the elect. Walking through, walking by faith, not by sight. Trusting in Yahweh Shema Shah, trusting in his word. You see, that's what's going to give us or grant us access to salvation. All right? Because why? We was called according to his purpose. Now, let me get this Hebrews. I got to make this short. So this is Hebrews. All right, 4:16. Yep. So it says, let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to him in the time of need. All right. Once again, let us therefore come boldly into the throne of grace. All right. So basically, you got to humble yourself down and you got to be firm and strong in faith. That's boldly. All right. Denouncing everything, all right, that you heard or seen or believe and trust in Yahweh Shema Shah, man. This is the time now. This is the high time to wake out of this sleep. Because our salvation is nearer than we believe. And we're going to have to come boldly. I give it all to you. All right? I trust not in my thoughts, my emotions. I lean not to my own understanding now. I trust in your word, Yahweh Shema Shah. That's how you come boldly. All right? And you're going to have to trust that the Lord said, hey, go over there with that man. Hey, go over there with that brother. Help that brother out. Do this, do that. You're going to have to trust in that, in Yahweh Shema Shah, that spirit, and do so. But you got to do it boldly in the spirit of Yahweh Shema Shah. Not wavering, not shaking, not doubting. All right? But let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy. And that's what it's about, obtaining mercy. All right? And you want mercy in a time of trouble. So in order to receive that mercy, guess what? We're going to all have to get along. Because you don't get along, or you don't, all right, have that mindset of helping, then guess what? You will not see no mercy. Because mercy relies in the household of faith. All right? Being in the truth, that's the only how you're going to receive mercy. Being covered by the blood of Yahweh Shai is the only how you're going to receive mercy. So it said, let us therefore come boldly in the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in a time of need. And that time of need is coming very soon, which is called Jacob trouble. All right, which consists of martial law, as we seeing right now. All right, we got the what they call DEA down here in Memphis. We got National Guard down here in Memphis. I ain't never seen these many fucking state troopers in Memphis. All right, the police, and we got another task force. All right, and they might be in other cities in states too, but I'm speaking about Memphis alone. All right, hard times is coming. All right, the MOTB being implemented. You know what they're going to cause for people that got jobs and houses and businesses? All right, it's going to be a shutdown. And how you going to be able to survive? How you going to be able to get, your accessories like food and water, certain resources? How you going to be able to do that? So you're going to be able to find grace and mercy through the brotherhood, through the sisterhood, by coming together, by getting along. That's going to be the mercy. Having somebody to have your back. That's mercy right there. Because a lot of people ain't going to have that. 2/3 going to be shit out of luck. Nobody going to come through for 2/3. They're going to have to suffer the same fate, all right, as Esau. But here it is, the Lord allowed us to eat. The Lord allowed us to have a joyful mind in the midst of hell. That's mercy. You got to see that. You know, you not going through what other people going through. That's mercy. In a time of need. Right now, you can't say this is a time of need right now, even though it is, but it ain't got to that level. We talking about it's gonna get to that level that we gonna need spiritual intervention. We gonna need divine intervention. We gonna need Yahweh Shema Shah to step up. All right? Time is coming on that level. So we gonna need mercy and grace in that time. But guess what? If you don't have that mindset to share, give, come together, work it out, then guess what? You ain't gonna receive mercy. All right? Because outside of the household of faith, it's gonna be chaos. It's gonna be war, violence. There's gonna be a lot of things going on that you're gonna desire the Lord to intervene and help you. These are the hard times we're coming into. So when you're talking about these only for, yeah, because we preach to the elect. All right? But in general, in order to survive, you're going to need help. You're going to need to come together as one to what? To survive. You know? But Lord willing, y'all brothers and sisters edify. I just want to hit that real quick. And to next time, Shalom, Baba Baba, Raka. May the Lord continue to bless y'all morning. Once again, can I see the goddamn comments? So Lord willing, let me see. Okay, he should reach out to the camp. Exactly, Elder. Exactly. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go back on my comment board and I'm gonna tell him that. He just should reach out to one of the, what I'm saying? They downtown, brothers out there. So that's what I'm gonna tell him though, Elder, go down there and try to find out the camps. So Lord willing, y'all brothers to edify next time. Shalom, about Barbara. May the Lord continue to bless y'all morning.